Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another session of our APAHM Book Club. My name is Jane Ellison. I serve as the Public Relations Co-Chair for the ECC this year. Would any of y'all like to introduce yourselves as well?
Wait, I didn't hear your pronouns.
Oh, yes, I'm stupid. I'm sorry. My pronouns are she, her, hers.
No, you're
Okay,
not
go
stupid. You're Jane.
ahead.
And I will segue into me. My name is Sam Bosley, he, him, his, and I'm the Technical Networking Chair for Masu.
And my name is Kyle. My pronouns are he, they, and I'm one of the advocacy chair for Masu.
Beautiful. And then today's topic that we're covering today is Bakla, and we're assuming it is pronounced Hijra, and they're both basically a third gender word or like a word to describe third gender people within the Filipino and the South Asian or Indian communities. Would anyone like to define it more further than that, or do you think that's okay? Or...
I think I saw this from the article too, but they said something like the way we define third gender is very westernized, the way the way that people define it, the people who actually use those words are it's just very casual. It can be just like a man expressing themselves very femininely, or even straight up identify as a trans woman. So the range varies. It can be like an expression kind of thing, or it can be like an identity kind of thing too. So it's very fluid in that sense. For Hijra at least, or I'm sorry, for Bakla at least. I'm not sure I recall if there's any specific way they identify that is different from Western for Hijra.
Yeah, I think that makes sense because you hear that gender is on a spectrum, it's not the binary female male. And so saying a third gender would imply that the male and female is the binary narrative that exists. So that makes sense to me. Okay, so first off, so we read two articles about the Hijra and the Bakla, and they kind of described how they were used. So the Hijra were people that lived near trees, often sex workers, because they were kind of shamed and couldn't find jobs, was the impression that I got from that. So then I had a really stupid question, but I'm gonna start with it. So in the article, right, it says that Hijras are shamed, or people are really uncomfortable around them, even though they're also people within legends that are heroes. And I thought that was really interesting. But then at the same time, I was reading this and I was like, they're sex workers, but there's people are uncomfortable around them. So then I was curious, who buys their services as sex workers? That's a really stupid question that I had to ask.
I mean, so I think in that case, it's not necessarily that they're uncomfortable all the time. It's just they're uncomfortable in social settings. So I think especially with regard to this sex work in the United States, legal sex work, of course. But if you make an acquaintance with a current prostitute, that'd be seen as weird when it's not in the context of sex. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of the same thing where it's yeah, in the context of sex, oh, no one cares. But whenever it's on a social setting, it's oh, I don't want to be associated with that,
Oh, okay. I better understand the article now. I was so confused. Okay, but then an actual question that I had, to start our conversation. So obviously in the articles they mentioned that in the past, historically, for example, Hijra especially, they were heroes in legends. They were these people that brought luck or curses, one or fortune or curses. So then now, because of colonialism, it's not like that. So I wanted to ask, what are the effects of colonialism? We'll just put a broad question of that there, and then specifically in communities of the Hijra and the Bakla.
I can go first. I can only imagine just the worst way possible, because for Hijra, the way the article described it, they were like so worshipped, right? They were like the top of the hierarchy. And then colonialism kind of stripped them away from that and make them feel like so much less than, and so restricting them. So I feel like there's a lot of not only like oh, I can't find a job now, or I don't have job security now. Not only is there that type of harm, but there's also like lots of trauma from what I can only like imagine, like being stripped off of everything. And I think like that kind of effect is not something that can like easily be restored. Like, oh, like here you go, you have a job again. But no, like you still can't really erase that trauma. Yeah, that like I feel like it goes really, really deep too, beyond just status, and then more so like psychological, maybe emotional being and stuff.
Yeah, I think specifically with regard to this, it's like introducing a new idea, like that's the fact that like someone might be less than another person. And it's like once that idea is instilled in people's minds, it's really hard, like you can't erase that idea from people's minds, you know? And so it's the same with like racism and sexism. It's like whoever came up with the idea that like a certain color of skin should be better than another color of skin, like once that idea is in place, there's nothing you can do to like it's, or at least it's really, really hard to erase that once that idea is already in someone's mind, you know? Because then they automatically will think of that idea and see everything with a certain like prejudiced view. So it's just kind of sad to know that like this is essentially the result of colonialism, that like everything was fine until someone introduced this idea.
Yeah, I think that makes sense for both of those responses. I'm thinking back on the reading as well, and like I remember that like they talked about was it the gender, I don't remember, gender convergence? No. Gender correction, that's the I'm sorry. Gender correction surgery, and like how modern medicine like allows them to do that, but because of like their work, they don't have access to it. And so a lot of times like I remember like they said that like there were a lot of there were countless people lost from like castration surgery that wasn't done by a professional, and like it was like really sad and like to read that. And so I wonder like if not for the effects of colonialism, if these people were still respected or viewed as people in general, would they have gotten like proper gender correction surgery that like wouldn't like that. We'll go to Kyle's question because it's colonialism related too. Do you think the harms and trans erasure from colonialism can be reversed?
I mean, reiterating off of what I said earlier, like once you have that idea instilled in people's minds, it's really hard to erase it. So I don't think it's impossible. I mean, it's the same as I think we all have the power within ourselves to change things, you know, be the change you wish to see in the world. But at the same time, it's extremely hard. It's like, how do you get people to think a different way? How do you get everyone to think a different way? You know?
Yeah, I almost think of it as like, I guess there's no way to make other people change how they think or change how they act. So, like, you can really only change one person, and that's yourself, you know? And like, you have to educate yourself, you have to teach yourself how to be better and be the better person, I guess, is how I think of it. But it's a really small change and really small steps, but steps nonetheless.
I mean, well, I also think so. In addition to changing yourself, I mean, you obviously have the most influence over yourself, but I think you also have a lot of influence on the people you interact with, and people will remember you for who you are or who you were. And so, even like, I mean, maybe there's an obvious example, but like, if you were to have like a family, and if you have a significant other, or if you have children, like your legacy will be passed down to them. And likewise, like if you have really close friends, they will remember you for the things you believed in, you know? And so like that's like a small thing, like just you like setting an example is already a huge change.
Yeah, I agree with everything that y'all said. I think some might be like some type of harm might be like reversible, uh, like basically like the article said, like the government of India like legally recognize hijras again, or third gender. So on a legislative level, yes, it can be recognized or reversed. But I think like when I think about this question, I think of like oh, like there's all types of label. I think of like like the actual LGBTQIA plus, that kind of label, because they are quite recent and they were coined to address those who were left out because they were left out. And so like I'm just trying to see it in a way like we have to build frameworks to get these people to be re-recognized again. Because if these things didn't happen to like the LGBTQIA people, like there wouldn't be that kind of label in the first place because they wouldn't be left out in the first place. So there are like some, so no, like I don't think it can be reversed. Like in it, like mindset wise, like kind of like what Sam says, some mindsets are just very hard to be reversed. But I think like what can happen after that will probably have to be like people will have to start developing frameworks, developing some type of label system, like how we did in the Western with that, and try to figure out how to move on from there.
Yeah, Kyle, you were talking about the LGBTQIA plus, like the labeling, and I like made me think of something was like a lot of these terms used like label these people used to be derogatory slurs. Like queer was not like queer used to be a slur and like sometimes can still be used as a slur. And I think it's interesting that like people have like used it and or people have taken it to like I don't know what the word is, like empower themselves instead. Like they've like I'm blinking in my head. I'm so sorry. But I think it's really interesting that like people have taken this slur. This isn't a slur. I'm going to use it to empower myself. Like the word bitch for women, okay, is like people use it as like a compliment instead of an insult now. And I think it's really interesting. And that made me think of that.
I mean, I think you said it. I think, at least in my mind, like the word that you're going for is like empowerment. It's very empowering, you know, to take something that was like used against you and kind of like do like a no you reverse Uno sort of thing, turn it back on the system.
Yes, reverse Uno. That's true.
Yeah, I kind of want to ask, like, or this is like, I think this is a perfect segue to this quote and this question I'm about to ask. But like the quote I found interesting was like from the Bakla article, and it says like, while diversity sometimes relies on labels to facilitate communication, those labels are also historically loaded. Each letter of LGBTQIA plus rainbow denotes something in particular for communities represented by them, but also with derogatory associations imposed by others. But what if we start to rethink these labels or even start to look at others? So I think it's very interesting because it's like challenging, like, oh, maybe labels didn't like there wasn't used to be label. It used to be like, okay, and it was better that way before too. So what do y'all kind of think of that quote? What's your reaction? And do you think like are labels important, or should our society try to go back to a time where labels weren't even needed in the first place because we just live so harmoniously? What do you think?
I want to say that because the oppressions exist and have been made, it's like necessary to have the labels almost. I don't know how to, like, I don't see a society in the future that resorts back to this labelless, harmonious world. And I almost want to say that labels, in a sense, are your identity, right? Like, I don't know. I go back to like our conversation last week of like the multiracial, like the conversation we had, and like, I don't know, people, there aren't loaded like I mean, there aren't like slurs against like being Japanese American, but like that label of like Japanese American is like who I am, and I label myself as that. And like I think it's important to label yourself and like recognize who you are as like part of your identity, and like you should be empowered and like proud of that identity. And like the moment that you stop being proud of it, I think that's when your label is actually taken away. And the word turns into a slur, if that makes sense.
Yeah, going off of that, like I actually think that the labels are important, and I think they're actually better than if we didn't have labels. And not necessarily because I want these labels to define us, but rather I want people to take these labels and keep them as their own. Because if you live in a society without these labels, everyone is kind of the same. And while everyone is probably living in harmony, I think that there's something beautiful about seeing people being able to individualize and express themselves, saying like, yes, I am, like for me, I can proudly say like, yes, I am half Taiwanese. And I won't say as proudly, yes, I am half Caucasian, but hopefully like we would be able to get to a point where like everyone would be able to say like, I am so proud to be Chinese. I am so proud to be Japanese. I am so proud to be American, and like that's the kind of harmony that I see, where like we're still all like accepting of one another, but we're at the same time proud of our individual labels that make us who we are.
On a slight segue note of like, I remember reading this quote in the story, and I'm gonna call myself out and say that I didn't know what all the letters stood for. Like it's like I don't think I know what I stands for, if that makes sense. And like I was thinking about it and I was like, I didn't really learn about like what sexuality or like gender meant until college, right? So then that posed my third question of like, what are ways we could increase knowledge about sexuality and gender identity in the public? Because like, I feel like people aren't exposed to this, like, or they are, but they ignore it, or they're not in the environment to be taught it, if that makes sense. Yeah.
It's honestly a really hard question. I don't think it's something that I could necessarily answer to the fullest. Um, and I guess like the answer that I have isn't really an answer, like something that I can do personally as like a solution. But I think that there's a lot of um, responsibility and burden on health teachers in early and middle school education, because they honestly have so much burden, teaching safe sex, but also teaching more about sexuality and what it means to be, like what sexuality means, what does gender mean. And I wish I could help them, because that's not my desired profession. But at the same time, I think they have such a huge responsibility in this, and they play such a huge role. And I think, at least for me, in the health classes that I took in middle school and high school, we were never taught about any of this at all. And it was only until I came to university that I learned about these things. And so I think if they started teaching about like the differences between like sexuality and gender, and like the different identities, and different, I guess, areas of each, I think that would have helped me at least.
Yeah, I think I agree. Oh, I'm sorry, Kyle. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say like I agree with that. Like we just need more support and resources for these health teachers, because it feels like, I don't know the statistics on this, but it feels like so many health teachers are under supported. Um, yeah, and I hate seeing a centralized government, but this might have to be like something that the government have to like do to like provide more support like across the nation for these health teachers, for these curriculums to happen. Um, but yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I was thinking about this, and then like it was also like a topic covered in one of my classes that I'm taking, and like how sex ed is like talking about like teaching abstinence rather than safe sex practices, and then also like you don't learn about sexuality or gender identity. And I was thinking about it, and I was like, yeah, that is the perfect class to teach like sexuality and gender identity, and instead I'm taught about why I should avoid sex because I might end up with all these different STDs kind of thing. And so, yeah.
Yeah, now that you brought that up, a concern that so many queer folks have is that like not only do they not know much about like what's the difference between gender and then sexuality, and then your own sex too, and then sexual orientation, like all the differences. Like not only do they not know that as they go through high school, but they also don't know like what's the sex component of it. Like we see straight people know, like, like straight, their identity, but they also get like straight sex ed. There's not much of queer sex ed going on. So lots of kids or lots of folks just feel like they don't really know, and they don't know like safe sex ed practices for them too. So yeah.
It's interesting. I like, it makes sense. And that's like an accessibility issue of like, I, as like a straight cis person, like I never realized that like the sex education I got was straight sex education. I never thought about that.
Lawsuit.
Okay.
I also personally, like growing up before realizing I was queer, I also never realized that too. That like, oh, there's not that. There's lack of that until you need it. So it's like, yeah, it's like you never know what you don't know.
Mhm.
So I suppose, yeah.
Yeah. We're kind of hopping away from the questions that are listed on our Google Doc. So I wanted to ask if, I think it's Sam's questions left. Do you want to discuss any of the quotes that you have?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I didn't have any questions. I just had like quotes that I thought were really interesting. And this is, so I'll just read the first one. The first one is a quote at the end of, I believe, the article on Hijra. And it goes like this, and this is actually quoting one of the Hijra. They said, "Personally, I don't want to beg. Nobody wants to beg. And the situation is worse now for begging. The police harass us. They don't let us beg anymore on trains. But we aren't given any other opportunity. And now you ask us not to beg? This is not fair. This is not justice." At the end of the interview, said person looked at me and asked very earnestly, "What do transgenders do in your country? Do they do sex work?" And so that's the quote. I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
I don't know. When I read this, it was like heartbreaking because like obviously this person isn't happy, or like it doesn't sound like they're happy. Like they are begging for like money to like feed themselves every day or like take care of themselves. And like as it was said in the reading, like they're forced into sex work and they like have to, what was it? It was a guru, I think. And like the guru tells them what they have to do and like who they have to like have sex with. And like, I mean, I don't know. I feel like it'd be really difficult to be forced into a life like, or it has to be really difficult to be forced into a life like that.
Yeah, just like everything Jane said, that's heavy. Like I think I don't know, it's just really devastating. Like I can like I can't imagine like the frustration, like what, like when that person says like, oh, this is not justice. Like yeah, I don't know, that's the only reaction I have. And then yeah.
Yeah, I think it has a kind of a deeper meaning too, because like if you read the last sentence, like what do transgenders do in your country? Do they do sex work? And like for the most part, you'd probably say like, oh no, like in America, like transgenders generally don't do sex work. But I think what she's getting at is not necessarily like do they do sex work, but it's like are they playing a role that they don't want to be a part of? And I think that's like definitely a yes, you know? And like reading the article, I mean, it wasn't really in this quote, but like it kind of seemed like a lot of the hydras that were doing sex work, it was kind of like a complacent thing. It's like, well, this is my life, and so I have to live it. Not necessarily like this is who I want to be, you know? And so it just makes me, it's really honestly very heartbreaking to read this kind of thing and know that like, yeah, like maybe it's not in the context of sex work in America, but this is actually happening in America right now. You know, people are being forced into these roles, and it's like, I guess this is my life. I have to accept it. You know, sort of ideals, and it's so sad to see.
Yeah, I guess like pointing directly to the reading as well was like, I remember one of the people that was getting interviewed was like, they started their like work when they were like 12 years old or something, and like there's no like, what is it, like I don't know how the legalization part of that works, but like there's no like idea of like, I don't know, it's like it's a minor in the, at least in the US, that's a minor.
Sorry to cut in, but
But
it was actually when they were 8,
oh,
like
when
8 years
see,
old.
that's even worse. Like they're minor, like I don't know, like when I was 8 years old, I was like running around chasing my baby brother, like to put a diaper on him while he was getting changed. Like I would not have been capable of like, that's so traumatic. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just honestly very heartbreaking to see that happen. And like, even though, like I said earlier, like even though that thing isn't, even though that isn't necessarily like straightforward, like happening in America, it's still happening. Like those same sorts of things are happening in America. We just kind of turn a blind eye to it because, oh, it's not sex work, so obviously it's not, you know. But it's still, it's like social, it's the whole idea of like social constructs. You have like these institutionalized, I don't know, roles that everyone has to play, and you know, not everyone fits into these roles. Not everyone is the same. So yeah, I thought that quote was it was honestly very sad, and it was honestly a very good way to end the reading, kind of with a leaving it on a cliffhanger, like on a really sad note. But yeah, I had another quote that I wanted to bring up that I thought was interesting as well, and I think this is in the same article. But it says this: when the British colonized India in the mid-19th century, they brought a strict sense of judgment to sexual mores, criminalizing, and then in quotes, carnal intercourse against the order of against the order of nature. That was the beginning, scholars say, of a mainstream discomfort in India with homosexuality, transgender people, and hijras. So I was wondering about your all's thoughts on that. Okay, I can go first. So I thought it was interesting. I was just very interested in what they put in quotes. The British brought a strict sense of judgment, criminalizing quote unquote carnal intercourse against the order of nature. So I'm just kind of curious, like, I don't actually know, like, if this was an excerpt specifically that like the British, like maybe in some written statements said this specifically, but it's like, what does it mean by carnal intercourse? What does it mean by order of nature? And then I guess in a broader sense, what is the order of nature? What do we define as the order of nature?
I guess like I just think of like Europeans spreading Christianity having this belief that man and woman like are to have sex and they are the only ones to have sex, and like this idea of like heterosexuality, you know. And so I don't know what carnal intercourse means, but I'm guessing like their order of nature is like what doesn't give birth to a child, I guess, like because, but I don't know. A lot of times when, sorry, go ahead, Kyle.
No. I straight up just interrupted you while you were still talking. So no, you
No,
finish.
I was about to go off on a tangent of like, you always hear about like these like things of like, for example, the Hijra, the Bakla, where like colonialism came in, was like, you are wrong, like you can't be this or whatever. And then like you also read, like I was talking about earlier with the Native American Two-Spirit people, who are also basically the same, like the conceptually the same as like what the Hijra or the Bakla like are defined as. And I think of like, obviously Europeans like spread this ideology, but then I wonder if like European culture as well, like it must have been really difficult to be outside the norm in European history. Like, how did they survive that? Or like, did they survive that? I guess. Like, is this sometimes like a thought that I have, but that was my tangent.
They probably survive, but not like live. You know, like I think like I'm just imagining like there would used to be like death threats if you practice carnal intercourse against the order of nature. And so I don't know. I feel like it's just a lot of fear. Like people just live fearfully and just not be themselves, I guess.
Yeah, the thing I wanted to say about that is like it's actually really hard to know what that was like, and the reason why is because history is very whitewashed. No one ever hears the narratives of those things, of those people, and so like even now, like we're still struggling to put these things in history, and it's just so depressing to know that like I don't even know like what it was like to be like, I don't know, like an immigrant like in the 1900s, because there's virtually no records of it. I mean, even then, like now there's still some records, but like think about like what it was like, I don't know, being like being someone of darker skinned descent, like living in Europe, in like the 1600s. It's like we don't even know what that's like because their narratives were never told. It's just really sad.
Yeah, kind of going a little bit off of like narratives not being told. I kind of want to go back to this carnal intercourse against the order of nature. That just reminds me of like how like heterosexuality is like, that's the main narrative, right? Like that's the natural way. And for a long time, even after like I realized I was queer, I thought so too. Like, oh, that seems kind of odd. Like I'm not it's like homosexuality is not reproducing anything. It's not until like I go through I took my biology class and it's like, oh, there are actual purpose. There's DNA activating for like I don't know, like there are like certain
The male G spot is in the prostate.
yeah. So like there are like uh I forgot the terms now. I took it last semester, but like the chromosomes. There's like X combinations of multiple X chromosomes or Y chromosomes. Like even in humans, like a person can have XYYY or XXXY or chromosomes or any whatever. Besides the point, it's not unnatural, and that just happens to be the main narrative. So I'm just frustrated. Like I, yeah, like these narratives were not more often told. Not that like you need biology to prove in order to justify you being you, but yeah, I don't know.
I think, go ahead, Sam. I keep talking.
I just wanted to say I really liked what you said, Kyle, about you saying it's not unnatural, it's just not the main narrative. I think that really struck a chord with me.
I think that it is really unfortunate that there is a need to rely on science to explain things, but in a way, I guess like obviously everything that is happening that people choose, I don't know, with like heterosexuality, homosexuality, like everything is normal, it's natural. But like I guess like obviously people believe that it's not, and like the cardinal intercourse, what is it, to overcome nature or whatever. I'm sorry, I like lost it. Against the order of nature, I'm sorry. It's like statements that are put out against it, but I think that science is a useful tool to explain that it is natural because there is scientific evidence of it, if that makes sense.
Sometimes it's hard. I mean, I guess this is off on another like science tangent, but sometimes it's even hard to even like trust science because like, I mean, even in anthropology class I took last semester, we learned about, how like in the 1600s they did a lot of white Europeans, funnily enough, did a lot of studies on whether, like darker skinned people have less brain capacity, and essentially they falsified their claims and published them, in like scientific journals, and these things weren't overturned until like the 1700s or like 1800s. And it's just kind of sad to know that like people put their biases into science, which should be unbiased, but it's because it's what people want to believe in, so they think that they should impose their beliefs on other people.
Yeah, that's true. or like people will like realize that there's like hints of like actual like it is natural like that, and then like they'll stop learning and they're like, I never learned that in school type. I'm like, keep learning.
Okay, so I guess now that we're all out of like questions, I guess like what are the main takeaways? So I mean, like at least for me, like reading both of those articles and after having like discussed a lot of things, I guess I guess my main takeaway is that I just feel more sad. Like I feel more like weighted because I just know these things exist and it's like I feel so helpless against the system, you know?
Yeah, I agree. I think my initial like first thought after reading was like,
Masu.
like that's all I had. But it's really sad. And I don't know, there's like obviously like these are things that are happening in other cultures. So like there's nothing we can really do about it, but I hope that we can do something about it here.
Yeah, yeah. Everything that y'all said, I, but I also just suddenly thought of like, it's so powerful that um, like for example, like the person who did all of this
Masu.
invasion or colonialism work, like the person who started coming to Asian territory and then start shaming people, hey, this is not right. Like little did they know, like that one action of theirs set up like an entire system. And it went from like one behavior of shaming and then to like a collective culture. And then it became like something far more beyond of that, that like literally strip away people from their status from top goes down to bottom. So I don't know. I thought it's like, wow, like that is an incredible power that an individual can just have in affecting others. Um, and yeah.
Yeah, I guess kind of combining like what you just said, Kyle, with like what Jane said earlier is like I guess one of the takeaways that I also had is like we have so much power and influence over our lives, but also our circle of influence. So all our peers, all of our friends and family. And I guess it's up to us whether we use that power for good or for, bad things. And so I guess like at least for me, like I mean, I don't know if everyone wants to do this, but I want to be a good influence to those in my circle, and I want to be a good example, uh, just in general, you know.
Wholesome. Yeah. Any other thoughts, comments, concerns, questions, added takeaways? You feeling good? Okay. I'm gonna say that's probably the end of our discussion for the night then. Thank you everyone for contributing.